We are back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. This morning we're talking with Jessica Santonato of Flip the Script. And we're talking about her life story and what brought her to this point in her life where she's now giving talks and providing what I would call as an expressive arts practitioner a safe place. You are holding space for people to be able to express themselves in a similar way that you're expressing yourself this morning.
Right.
So let's go back to a couple of questions I have for you. I hear the story.
Yes.
I know that, what do they call it? The profiling, the victimology of the abuse, but you keep going back.
Yes.
There has to be in that person that from the telling of the story, you conjure in your mind this massive human being of 270 pounds with vengeance in his eyes and, almost like a horrible monster. But there is an underbelly to that monster who you were in love with.
Right. Totally. Yeah, I think that's important to point out because, even in the news, he was described as an enforcer. And when grown men saw him, they would literally go and jump and hide. And so people always see the bad things people do, the quote unquote bad things people do, and the negative side. And I say this very clearly that this doesn't excuse anyone's behavior or actions.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is so much more room for compassion in this world. And this is why Flip the Script is so important, because it brings out stories and it gives people the platform to share what they've been through. I can't even tell you how many guys that I've met in prison that, for example, just one example, where they have grown up in a violent, abusive home and they've had to leave at an early age to survive for themselves. And so they get pushed out onto the street and they commit crimes to survive. And again, not to excuse what they do, but for my husband, he went from foster home to foster home to foster home. He was beat severely. He had a biological father that only came into his life to say, hey, I want you to deal these drugs for me. So, and that's just the surface of it. And he started a life of crime since the age of 12. And behind the scenes, I saw a big guy, but also he was a teddy bear. And I felt like it was an honor to get to see that because I saw the big heart that he actually had. Like there were times when I felt like I was the cold one, and he actually told me at times that I was too cold. And this is someone that had killed people. And
had stabbed you in the head.
And had stabbed me in the head. And he was telling me I was cold. And so he had a big heart, and he absolutely dreaded and hated putting on, for example, the Gucci belt and all the fancy stuff to show off to the younger guys because it's part of the whole recruitment process, right? Saying like, hey, look at this. If you come into the gang, you get access to all of this stuff and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And he really hated that because it wasn't him, but he knew it was part of the gig. And at some point he wanted to get out and he wanted to share his story through a ghostwriter. And obviously that hadn't happened. And when I had left the marriage, all it took was for me to tell one or two people what happened to me, where they started to share it with other people. And then eventually Mississauga City Hall called me and said, hey, can you speak to a group of high school students? Can you speak at domestic violence, an event? And I share that because some people that might be listening might think like, where do I even start? Right. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is just sharing it with one person, and you never know where that's going to go. And also what I got to see was that women who were in a violent or abusive relationship started to come up to me and say, I'm going through this, or I went through this. And I had two women that actually came up to me and said, my husband tried to kill me as well. And I was like, what is going on here? And so I realized that by not sharing my story, I was doing a disservice for people. And I had to put aside that quiet, shy, mute Jessica that I knew because it wasn't about me anymore. And even nowadays, it's like, geez, like my story. And yeah, I went through all of this, and there's a lot of healing that people that they've received by listening to my story and getting to meet me and all this stuff. Right? And
Now, how about you personally? When you
Yeah.
began to tell this story, did it provide a healing modality for you as well?
It totally did, yeah, because I got to see, and I mean, the attack was in 2014. We're in 2019. It's an evolution, and it's still evolving.
It's still evolving.
It's still evolving.
That's relatively recent.
It is.
in terms
It
of-
is. Yeah, and I feel like I don't know if we can ever say we fully heal, because I feel like we can think consciously that we're done healing, and maybe 5 years down the road something comes up. And I see this with people I work with where they're like, wow, I thought I healed this part of my life, and when I started to craft this part of my story, I just broke down in tears and realized how much I have not healed actually. So and I've seen that firsthand as well, where it's like 2014, the way I told my story or the things I realized is completely different from what I'm sharing today, right? Which could be different from 2-3 years from now,
Right.
as well. So it's definitely an evolution. Yeah.
So, out of all of this, which sounds, because you've given us the 20-minute Reader's Digest version kind of a thing, the synopsis.
Yeah.
Out of all of this chaos and violence and negative energy comes 3 beautiful children
Yes,
who you, like a fierce mama bear, protected with everything you have.
that's right.
And you've now moved on.
Yes,
You are remarried,
that's right.
which is in itself a remarkable thing.
Yes.
A lot of people hold on to that pain for so long that they can't remarry. They can't even think of having a relationship with someone else.
Well, that's the funny thing too, because I thought I was, like I said, I was still damaged goods. Even who's going to take a single mom with 3 kids? That's that's a lot. That's a lot. And I actually said,
Who's doing talks on gangs and violence.
yeah. And I said, I'm not going to look for a partner. I knew I wanted to remarry at some point, but I said, I'm not going to look for anyone until I reach a certain part in my business. And then I realized, you know what, Jess, you could be cutting off the love of your life. And Michael came in my life, and I'm very blessed to have him, because I think there's still parts that aren't easy for him to listen to, but he's been so supportive, and
Because he loves
knows
you.
he loves me, and he loves the kids so much, and he is so supportive, and he knows I speak about gang rape, and he's like, oh, you had to talk about that again today. And he's like, I know. He's like, I just got to breathe. It's okay. But he's just so loving. And
How did you meet him?
He was at a trade show. So he was a relationship coach at the time. So there's the joke that he took me for himself. So he said, what are you looking for? And 6 months later, we got together. So that was that. And in 2 years, we just passed our 2-year anniversary, and going strong. He's just so amazing, so loving.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so blessed to have him.
So you have these 3 amazing kids. You remarried.
Yes.
And how do you process that all for your kids?
That's been a journey in itself with the 3 kids, because that happened when they were so young, and they've been there from the start. And from the start, I mean, like I said, my first was conceived in prison. So they've been to the jail visits. They've seen my injuries. They've seen me leave their father, and they've heard me speak about what happened publicly, including the rape. And I figured, you know what, there's nothing to hide, because they're going to find out eventually. So it's better they hear directly from me than someone else.
Right.
And they directly asked me, like, what did Dad do? Did Dad actually kill somebody? And I tell them the truth. And the oldest one, it's been a challenge, because she hasn't wanted to get help, where the younger 2 got counseling. And so right now it's just this roller coaster ride, where, just like I was saying, where healing never ends. And maybe in 2 years something crops up. So I find that with the kids, there's this wave of emotions, and kids are very resilient. And at the same time, there are things that crop up where it's, okay, this is from the past and we need to deal with it. So if you want to call that karma, if you want to call it ghosts from the past, there's a trail of impact, if you want to call it. So definitely dealing with that these days, and it's not always easy.
No.
And we got to bring a lot of patience and love, because there's me that has done a lot of healing, and there's 3 kids that come with me. So Michael's been very key in that as well, in helping them heal, and having a stable father figure in their life, right? Like I have 2 daughters and a son, and my son, when this all happened, he started to run away, and he was very young, and he actually took a knife and a hammer, and he tried to stab his sister and attack them. And I think he must have been like 8 years old, 9 years old, like very young. So thankfully he's great now. He's a great kid and just loves his video games. But again, it's been challenging.
I imagine.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to Thanksgiving, a time
Yes.
of year where people sit around the table and they hold hands and they
Give
think of
thanks.
all the wonderful things that they have in their lives. And coming from this background, what are you the most thankful for these days?
Oh, I don't know if there's one thing. I would just
No, lots of things.
Yeah. Well, number one, life, just life in general, because for me, every day that I wake up, I thank my angels, I thank God, I thank universe that I'm here to experience another day, that I get to experience my kids, that I get to hug them, squeeze them, that I have a roof over my head, have the love of my life, my parents are alive. I'm getting to make an impact for guys in prison and guys that are in recovery, to live on purpose after everything that I've been through, to find, I don't like to say find a purpose, because I feel like
You
it's
have a
always,
purpose.
it's always within us. But to receive this gift, this blessing out of all of the adversity that I've been through, I don't know if I can ask for more than that, and I know that I have divine intervention and source and angels on my side, and I talk to them every day. And, when people say, wow, Flip the Script has grown so much, and how did you attract so-and-so, and how is this happening? Like, you know what? It's me, but it's not me. I'm creating this with a higher power. And I just say, just use me as a vessel to do your work, and I let the rest flow through. So
How do the guys take you? I mean, normally, if that's a word that anyone could use these days, but in a regular circumstance, you have a man that walks in and talks to the men
Yes.
about these sorts of things from the man's perspective. How do they look at you when you walk in and you are the one, and they've been in these situations, and you are the one that was raped, and you are the one that was beaten? How do they take you?
They really appreciate it. All of the guys have been, number one, very respectful, and they are surprised. I get this a lot. When you look at me now, you would never think I went through what I went through. And so it always surprises them, because they're like, no way, you went through that. And they appreciate that someone can come in here and be real with them, man or woman. But I think especially as a woman, because I've had guys say, I feel like I can open up to you more because you are a female than a male. Because with men, it could be the typical like alpha trying to prove something, especially in a prison atmosphere. And so, yeah, the guys are just wonderful. I've had guys open up. And also I know that I have this, I don't know if you want to call it a skill or a talent or some kind of magical ability, but I have this ability to get people to share, especially men, to open up to me. And at the end, they're like, I've never shared this with anybody. I don't know. Barely know you. I don't know why I'm sharing this with you. So that's a real honor that they're able to share with me. And even on the side, right? Even if we're doing group work in the prison, for example, I've had guys on the side, tell me things in private and that they don't get to share with anybody else. So, I mean, to answer your question, just they appreciate it. Yeah. And they're very open.
I wonder, do they ever give you that look of a shameful look, like they're a little bit embarrassed of what they might have done?
That's a good question. Haven't had anyone
And
verbalize
they
that.
drop their eyes and not really want to engage because they're maybe a little bit embarrassed of what they've done.
If I think back, I can recall a couple like eyes drop, but no one's actually verbalized it. But I think it's important to see that here's a woman coming from a place of, I'm not blaming, right? Because it'd be a
Right.
different energy if I was there saying like,
Look
screw
what you've done.
him and look at, and you guys need to learn from your mistakes. But coming from the place I'm coming from of compassion and being there to serve them and help them grow, they see, you know what? She's not making me wrong for what I did, and she's not going to judge me. And they know that. So they appreciate it, and that's when they open up. And that's why it's really key when you work with people like this. You need to bring as full compassion and non-judgment as possible. And
I think that is key, the non-judgment part. It
Yeah.
also again, makes a safe environment, doesn't it?
Yes, totally. And trust me, I've had to work through my layers as well. Like working with guys in prison where it's like one day it came to the point of, Jess, why is it okay to support a guy who killed 10 people versus a guy who raped a child? Why is it not okay to support the guy that raped a child? And that took me aback because I was like, wow, Jess, that's judgment right there. But my personal boundaries, the humanity in me wants to be like, oh, that's so, especially as a mother, like, ooh, that crossed some personal boundaries there, right?
And personal boundaries are completely acceptable. You do have the right to make a boundary for yourself.
Totally.
And that's part of healing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and just observing like where that came from and how can I bring love to that guy as equally as the other guy that killed 10 people. And so that was a big breakthrough for me. And I mean, I'm still working through it. I'm going to be honest, like I'm still working through it. So, but like I said, love wins at the end of the day, right?
It does. So I was at your very first Flip the Script.
You were.
And I was honored and privileged to be there as a speaker, but more so to be an observer. I felt that I was watching people go through a process that was allowing them to free themselves to go on. There were a couple that were just kind of blabbling it all out, but that's at the baby stages, right?
Right.
And I said to the one guy who came up and approached me afterwards, I said to him, I hear your story. I hear it. We all heard it, but I hear it, I think, a little more deeply because I'm used to listening to people's stories. And I want to know what the so what is. He said, what do you mean, so what? Look at all the stuff that happened. I said, yeah. So? Take it that next step. What does this mean to you going forward? What does this bring out in you?
Right.
What would you like us to take home with us when we leave this room? And I think it really got him thinking because he did walk off by himself and do a little bit of processing for a moment and just kind of think because it's an interesting question. The victimology thing, we can all be victims.
Yes.
It's another thing completely to get out into the world and continue to live your life in a very fulfilled way.
Yeah. And that's where the message part comes in, right? It's like we can share our story and ABC happened to me. And what's the message, right? There's something that you're giving by sharing your story. So people can extract what they want to. And it always helps if you can craft that around a message. Yeah.
A takeaway of some sort.
Yeah.
A positive takeaway because goodness gracious, there are so many negative things.
Oh, yeah.
And so how has Flip the Script evolved for you? What do you see it evolving into? Is it exactly as you thought it would be when you first started?
No. So I actually didn't think the first night you were there, I didn't think it was going to go past that night, right? I opened up to the community and said, do you want this to continue? And all the hands went up. So we just passed our 9th, 10th event, which is amazing in itself. And then doing work in the States and having more people get wind of what Flip the Script is and wanting to share it and wanting to get involved. And, as any startup or nonprofit, that there's, finances and, sponsorship things. Like there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes to get things to run, right? As I'm sure that you're aware of. So, does it look like I thought it would? Yes and no. I knew that there would be a community because I knew, hey, there must be other people that aren't professional speakers that would love to share their powerful story. And so there is. And the involvement of it and just to see who's attracted to it and there's things in the background and things in the works that I can't release yet, but that are very exciting. And so I'm excited to expand this work into various prisons, various rehabilitation centers, and help bring more tolerance and non-judgment and love and compassion in this world.
So are you thinking eventually of bringing it to women?
Not at the moment. I'm not ruling it out. I know that's a big question. So that's the thing too. Like I'm all for women's empowerment. And at the same time, we can't leave men behind.
Absolutely.
And I feel like we're in the day and age where it's like women, rah, rah, rah. And what about the guys? There's, from my experience, I worked with men as well when I used to run sex and intimacy workshops, and there was so much pain that men were holding inside, and they wouldn't even tell their closest partner. Some of them said, I can't even tell my wife this.
That's not a man thing, is it? In what used to be our society, I think. Yeah,
and it was just eating them up inside. But when they were given the space, they would just pour out freely. And so men appreciate the space, a safe space, non-judgmental space, no alpha to alpha, fighting or anything like that, trying to prove anything, that they just have a space where they can express themselves. And that's very fulfilling for me to see, and it's very healing for them. And so my focus right now, my commitment is to men. And like I said, I'm not ruling out women perhaps down the road, and it's kind of like one thing at a time.
Right? One thing at a time.
Yes.
It is interesting. I have heard it said that women are getting together. They're excluding men in a lot of ways from a lot of the discussion that's currently happening with women's rights and women's issues and things like that. And the women are fixing themselves. They're working with each other and things. What are the men doing? What are the men doing?
Yeah.
And I think you are starting a movement that I think is really valuable.
Yeah.
And I thank you for that.
Oh,
thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, if we can't, oh, my pleasure. Like I said, it's when people say that, I'm like, it's me, but it's not me. But if we're going to rise up together in consciousness, mass consciousness is going to elevate, we need to work together. It can't be just
us and them.
Right, and us and them. And yes, I work with just men for now, but I'm saying like women can't work just together and like, let's support ourselves and let's strong suit this and we're independent. We don't need anybody else. We can fix ourselves. No, we need to work together.
So for Flip the Script, you do have women who are speakers and who are
totally
involved.
Yes.
Right? It is a space for everyone.
Yes, the space is co-ed. Thank you for pointing that out. The space is co-ed. It's just the give back part is focused on men. Although we do have one female grad because she was the only female in the rehabilitation house.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when is your next event?
Next event is November 4th in Vaughan, Steeles and Pine Valley. So come out 6:30 p.m. And every time you show up, your ticket helps impact a guy behind bars or in rehabilitation. So, the guys say, like, there was one guy, he said, when you guys show up in prison, the first time it's like, okay, you show up. The second time, the third time you show up to prison, I start to believe in myself because I say, if those people believe in me, maybe I should start to believe in myself. So every time you come out to a Flip the Script event, it helps us continue to show up. And each time we show up makes a difference for that guy.
Wow. Well, I am totally inspired and totally in awe. I wish you the best of luck with your endeavors. It's not even luck. I wish you divine guidance in whatever you're going to be doing, Brenda, because I think you're on a phenomenal path.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Fresh Waves just goes by so quickly. If you are looking for more information about Jessica, there is a website for Flip the Script and Facebook page and Instagram and all the rest of it. So just give her a Google and you'll find everything you need to know. Google Flip the Script.
Flip the Script Flip the Script Stories. Because Flip the Script is such a common name, right?
Right.
It's flipthescriptstories.com.
There you go. Well, thank you again for joining us this morning. And a very happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Jason, take it away. We'll be right back. You're listening to Fresh Waves.